Hello and welcome. Today we are going to talk about whether or not there is any innovation left in the smartphone market. With me, I have Jason Perlow and Adrian Kingsley-Hughes. So, hey, welcome back, folks. Jason, how are you? You're in Miami, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm the South Florida area, the Fort Lauderdale, Miami metropolitan area.
Cool. So, I my daily driver is an iPhone,
Okay.
and I have a second iPhone. They're both daily drivers. The second iPhone I use for video. I use both for video, and so I have an iPhone 6s Plus, both of them, and I haven't upgraded because I like the headphone jack. What are you driving, Jason?
Well, I drive a couple of different things, obviously, because I write about this stuff quite a bit. My main, I would call it a daily driver, but I'm using it less and less, is my iPhone 10, my iPhone X. And I also have several Android devices, most of them of Chinese origin, from the various manufacturers you cannot buy from in the United States unless it comes from Amazon, right? So I've been becoming sort of a specialist in brands like Huawei and ZT and some of the other off-brand weird ones that most people haven't heard of yet.
Cool, cool. And coming to us from Wales, which is up north of the UK, if I have this correct, is Adrian Kingsley-Hughes. Adrian, how are you?
Great, thanks. It's great to be here.
It is great to have you here. And your daily driver is what?
The iPhone 8 Plus.
The
I
iPhone.
upgraded. I upgraded from the 6 Plus to the 8 Plus, and I've also got a random number of Android devices and some old iPhones and stuff lying around the place. But this is the thing that gets the daily battering.
So let's get the 8 Plus versus the X out of our system right now. Why did you choose the 8 Plus, Adrian?
I think for me it was just because I was so used to my streamlined workflow with the old one with the home button. I just didn't see a point in changing that.
That makes sense.
And I wanted to kind of see how did people respond to it? How would it change as well? Because I think Apple has this habit of kind of products evolving pretty rapidly after the first evolution, and I didn't want to be caught with the first evolution one.
Makes total sense. I am fiddling with my earphone, which I may be doing all day because I didn't quite hook it up right, but we'll see. So, the purpose of this discussion is, have we reached, Jason, you called it peak smartphone, right?
Yes, right, yep.
Have we, what does that mean to you, and have we reached it?
So I think that if you look at the last 10 years and sort of the innovations that have come to smartphone devices, right, the type of things that we've seen in terms of evolution, right? We think about the software evolution of the operating systems of Android and iOS, right? The type of features that we see on a day-to-day basis, the way that the apps have been exploiting the systems architectures of these devices. What we've been seeing as far as in the last 2 or 3 years is really just building upon what's has already been there, but no significant new technology changes, right? If you look at things like processor cores, if you look at things like displays and RAM, things like that, right? That stuff really has not fundamentally changed in terms of improving the end user experience. When we look at applications like Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, those things really they don't exploit really the hardware that's really currently in the devices today, right? I mean, if you think about the way this happened with the PC industry, right? A lot of the applications that were developed that we use now really don't exploit the power of these i9 and i7 processors, right? Or if you have 64 gigs of RAM, the people who really do use those things have very specialized vertical applications for content creation and all those things. Those can exploit PC hardware. We're seeing a lot of the same thing happen today with mobiles, but there really isn't like any super duper exploitive application for smartphones or tablets, other than 3D games or something like that, right? So if we look at like the type of work, if you really want to think of them as workloads, the type of workloads that people run on their smartphones, they maybe exploited hardware that existed 3 years ago, not really so much, what we're using today. If we think about the type of innovations that these manufacturers are rolling into the devices. They are more processor cores, faster GPUs, more RAM, bigger displays, bigger cameras.
So
And
are we at peak smartphone simply because of a lack of developer imagination?
I just think that we've reached the limitations of what the technology really can do.
What do you think, Adrian?
I'd have to agree. I think what we're seeing is the iPhone came out. You look at the design of the iPhone, which is the one I'm most familiar with. It really hasn't changed. You've got more cores, more power, better display. You could argue that the Touch ID is an evolution. Face ID is again an evolutionary step, but it's tiny. It doesn't really kind of do anything new. And one of the main things I'm seeing is this push to AR, and that's exciting. But in my head, I'm thinking AR along kind of what Iron Man has got, Tony Stark has got.
Yeah, not built into a smartphone. Yeah.
Not something where I'm awkwardly holding my smartphone in front of my eyes. It's just awkward. It's just something to sell, something to put on the box, something to say, oh, now we do this. It doesn't really have any real power to it. It's a gimmick.
Yeah, and if you look at things like Face ID, right? And I bought the iPhone X because I wanted to see really how that technology worked. It required a lot of adaptation to use it. It doesn't work, if you're in full bright Florida sunlight, or if you're in darkness and you're wearing sunglasses towards the end of the day, because when it gets to dusk in Florida, I still put on sunglasses when I drive. Unlocking that device is not as easy as it sounds. Plus, you have this whole experience where they've done something with the iTunes store, or the App Store, where if you want to buy something, you have to hold the thing up to your face, and then you have to double click the side button to confirm the purchase, which I think is stupid. It just was very simple before, just to hit the touch ID, and bang, it was done, right? And I also find that when using smart Androids that have fingerprint sensors, the unlock action is very natural. It's very fast. I find that I have to adapt myself to use Face ID more than it being a benefit. It's so like I said, we can keep adding all these interesting features. Like, I do think that machine vision is very interesting. I think there's a lot of applications for machine vision. But I would love to see that in the rear camera actually do something. Like, I'd like to be able to just point my phone at something like, yeah, that's a Porsche 911. Or that's a poodle. That's cheddar cheese, whatever it is, right? And there are really cool things you can do with smartphone sensors. There's an Israeli company, for example, that makes a Bluetooth sensor that has a spectrogram on it. So with infrared, it's able to actually, if you point it at an object, it's able to essentially read the molecular signature of whatever it's pointing at. So whether it's a pharmaceutical, or if it's a plastic, or if whatever it is, or if it's wood, or if it's a fruit, it will know based on that signature, right? And looking that signature up in its cloud database, what that thing is. Now, so there are really cool things that you can do with sensors, very clearly, right? But I don't think that we've written the exploitive applications for those types of things yet.
Yeah, so I kind of see three applications that we can't do now as examples that the technology sort of could do, but if you add in better AI and you add in better sensors, you might be able to do that.
Right.
The first one is, my Apple Watch can tell what my heartbeat is, but it can't give a complete diagnostic spec of my health. And at some point, it would be really useful to be able to track all sorts of indicators.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, though, what that means, though, just like Alexa has no brains without AWS,
Yep.
these sensor-based applications on smartphones don't have any brains without cloud and big data and data lakes and machine analytics and all those things either. So if you really think about it, all the innovation that's being done with smartphones, the smartphone application, it's all happening in the cloud, because really the front end processing is always going to be very limited compared to what the cloud can do at scale.
Yeah, definitely. A second application of that is in AR. I downloaded 3 or 4 AR tools that are supposed to let you snap a picture of a wall and get measurements.
Right.
Which they don't. They don't work. First off, they require you to hold steady so much that it's actually not accurate. But I've moved from one house to another, and I'm going to be moving again in the next year when we buy the place that we're looking for. And I need floor plans. And what I would love to be able to do is, rather than the process I normally go through, which is tediously measuring out every room, I'd love to be able to take my smartphone, point it at the various walls, have it construct a dynamic floor plan that I can then use to help figure out where everything goes. And that's doable. AR can measure it, AI can figure it out, and the sensors can pick it up. We certainly have all the pieces, but we don't have the application and the software yet to really do the heavy lifting, you know. And the third application that relates to this is food. You know, we take pictures of our food when we eat, but I want to be able to take a picture of every meal I have and not write stuff down. I want it to tell me what are the calories, what are the various metrics, what is in everything I've eaten, without my having to, you know, figure it out. Now, like for example, Weight Watchers has a great little app, which has gotten better over the years. It was terrible a few years ago, but it's gotten better, where you can hit the barcode of something, and a lot of things that it previously didn't have, it can tell you, you know, what the calories or points or whatever it is in it. But I still can't go to a restaurant, or I still can't make a meal here, point a camera at it, and have it tell me what has that done to you know, what I'm you know, the amount I'm eating. Or I can't stick my camera up and have it watch me exercise, or wear my watch and have it tell me how many reps and record the reps. And, you know, that information should be stuff that our future smartphones can handle,
Right.
right? Am I right, Adrian?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm an Apple Watch user, you know, and I use this primarily for fitness-related stuff. I used to have a Fitbit before, which was okay, but really, it feels like a gimmick. And while I think Apple is probably going to be the company that moves into health first in a big way, because every step that Apple takes is to bind you deeper into the Apple ecosystem and make it hard for you to leave. That's, if you look at everything it does, photos in the cloud, your health data in the cloud, every step that Apple takes is locking you deeper into the ecosystem.
Yeah, and yet Apple's strength is not in the cloud. Their Apple strength is in devices.
Absolutely. That's the kind of oddity of Apple, that it wants to lock you in, but it's not very good at what it does. But I think in terms of locking you in, health is going to be one of them. I think definitely we're going to see blood glucose meters in the next probably 2 or 3 years. Better heart rate detection. I mean, I know some people working on different stuff for heart rate detection, arterial fib, especially for people in the fitness industry, things like heart rate variability is a big thing, and recovery from training and stuff like that. These are quite big things. I think that's going to be the way forward. Android, it's hard to look at kind of where people are going to go there. I honestly think we're there seeing this kind of same arms race that we saw with the PC, of more RAM, slightly better displays, bigger displays, more cameras. I think is the thing we're going to be seeing.
Yeah,
and I also
it's craziness with the cameras. Yeah,
and I think we're going to see 5, 6 cameras within a few years. And I think then we're just going to get to that point where it's just, these numbers don't mean anything anymore, and they're going to have to reset, and something's going to change there. So I think that's the direction we're seeing them go. On the one side, you've got the iPhone. On the other side, you've got Android. They're going in different directions. But in the middle are the users like you, David, who said you want something that measures your room,
right?
Which is cool application. But you're thinking, well, how much is somebody willing to pay for that app?
I'd pay $50 to $100 for it. I spent $100 on a room measuring device. I'd pay. You know, I prefer $10, but you know, if I can take something that's going to take 2 or 3 days of tedium and turn it into an hour of accuracy, you know, not everybody would, but you know, certainly real estate agents might. You know, Zillow is a huge real estate site. We've been spending a lot of time on it, and there's no floor plans. You know, so you look at these houses and you don't really know how things are in relationship to it. And part of that is because most of the houses don't have them. But, you know, if an agent were able to go snap, 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 and here's a floor plan, then of course it would be up there. Like we're starting to see drone shots and things like that. So Scott Fulton asked, he's a fellow writer of a different publication. He asked, hasn't the smartphone market reached a state of equilibrium such that any major participant can remain healthy indefinitely without innovating beyond a restricted incremental degree? Jason, maybe you can take this.
I think the answer is no.
There you go.
And the reason for this has to do with commoditization, right? So look what happened with the PC industry. Let's go back 20 years, right? 20 years ago, we all looked at Computer Shopper, right, and Byte Magazine and all those these big thick print publications, which none of us write for anymore, right? And there were many PC companies. Yeah, I can remember, Osicom and AST and some of these, brands which we don't know of anymore, right? Today, how many PC companies do we have realistically in the tier 1? 4, 3. We've got Dell, HP, Acer, Microsoft, Lenovo. What else? And then okay, Apple, if you really consider that. So really, but 4, realistically 4, right? So, but there may have been 20 or 30 back then, right? I mean, you had companies that were strong in PCs that are not anymore. You look Tandy, I mean, a whole bunch of ones.
Gateway.
And Gateway's gone, and Gateway was absorbed by Acer, right? So, all those companies are gone, right? But those machines cost what, $3,000-$4,000 a piece back in 1995, something like that, or in the late 80s, or whatever it was. So in the 20 years, what's happened? There's been consolidation of components, right? There used to be all these Cirrus Logics. You had more than one company making Intel style of processors and graphics cards and soundboards and all this crap. And look what's happened. It's all being integrated into the SoC, right? So now you have them all being integrated onto the chip, or 1 or 2 chips, right? And essentially the hardware variation has been eliminated with PCs. So basically all PCs are the freaking same, with the exception of the RAM and how many cores they got. And basically no one looks at sound card specs really on a base level PC. No one looks at graphic specs on a base level PC. You hear that's got 4 or 8 gigabytes of VRAM, and it's fine for except for the most performance intensive applications. Your basic $1,000 PC is going to be as good as a $1,300 PC for 90% of the things most average users. Maybe not you, me, and Adrian, right? But for your average person, right? So cell phones, smartphones, that's very much the same thing. If you look at companies, what Huawei are doing, right, or ZTE or Oppo and all those Chinese companies, they now have the ability to take all those functions. They can manufacture those microprocessors in their own fabs. They can get the price of an $800 smartphone down to a $200 smartphone, right? There's some pretty nice $200, $250 smartphones now, completely carrier unlocked. You can buy, maybe not from a major carrier, but if you go to Amazon, or if you go to one of these Chinese websites like DHgate or some of these others, you can buy some pretty nice, or you go to Huawei's direct website itself and you can buy them. These are pretty nice smartphones you can buy, almost, I would say almost indestructible cell phones for $200. Maybe they don't have all the features of a premier level like an S9 or something, but I would say 70 or 80% of it. And so really, smartphones are getting to the point where we will be able to go to your local drugstore, your local Walmart or Walgreens or CVS, and buy a smartphone that'll last you a year. It'll do 90% of what you want. For $100, $150. So really what you're looking at is the full commoditization of the supply chain, the technology stack, right? And who's going to be comparing specs between the phones anymore once you get to that point? A phone is just going to be something that you got to have, but it's not going to be people, coming, oh, look which phone I got the S9. Oh no, I got the off-brand Huawei, right? But at the end of the day, they're both going to run the same Android. They're running the same apps. That basically the parts going into them are going to be nearly identical. The difference is really going to be brand loyalty at that point. And I don't really think that phones, that type of consumer electronic device, has the same level of brand loyalty as something like a car brand. Like people think of their personalities installed in cars, right? Because like cars, Dave's got his big ass Charger, right?
Challenger.
I got my Challenger. I got my Camaro. You got your lorry or whatever the heck you got, right? And you like those things, right? We all like, yeah, we like those cars. But at the end of the day, right? We know that the car technology is changing. It's going to be going to EVs, and at that point, it's really just a shell, right? The shell, the transmission, the propulsion system is all going to be the same. It's all going to be the same electric drive system. It's all going to be the same centralized, automotive control computers and all that stuff, because manufacturing is going to become heavily standardized, right? So we know that's going to happen to the phone industry the same way it happened to the PC industry, right? So the real value is going to come from the applications. It's going to come from the applications and the data we have to use in the cloud, right? And that's what's happening to the smartphone industry. It's just most people haven't recognized that yet.
So is the cloud going to determine, for example, the cloud, if you're using Google's cloud and then Google's APIs, or Apple's cloud and Apple APIs, or Amazon's cloud and Amazon's APIs, is that how these vendors are going to get lock-in, or are you expecting that lock-in is while people are going to, excuse me, companies are still going to look for lock-in?
Yes.
Are you expecting that users will give in to lock-in, or it will be so commoditized?
I think it'll be heavily commoditized. I think that your end user is going to expect a particular set of services across the vendors. Just like when you look at Amazon versus Netflix, right? You expect there to be a certain number of free movies, but you know that Amazon's content that the shows they produce is different from Netflix's. Well, that's why you might own both of those, right? But so I think that's going to be very much the same with back-end cloud services. Maybe Google will have a better, I don't know, messaging email service. Maybe Apple's health service might be better. So depending on what are the type of things that attract you to a platform, right? All those things are going to be happening in the cloud, because the device at the end of the day will be the same, really almost exactly the same hardware between vendors, right? It's the services you're signing up for that's going to make the value add.
So Adrian, you famously called Android a toxic hell stew, but you've been going on recently about iOS essentially being the same thing.
It's all a toxic hell stew.
Yeah,
All it
so where does that leave? I mean, and should I even bother to mention Windows or something else, or like where does that leave us? Or is that creating or exacerbating the lack of customer loyalty, or do you think that there's still a future in operating system differentiation, or does it just not matter? Is it just the apps, as Jason's saying?
I think a lot of it is artificial. We've seen that kind of artificial division for years between Mac and Windows. And brand loyalty comes into it, especially with high-priced items like iPhones. Right. I think if you're going to go out and spend $600, $700, $800 on any device, you've already convinced yourself it's the best device in the world by that point. Right. That's already been made. That decision's already there. People are kind of already committed to what they're going to buy. But I don't know. 2 years down the line, it's hard to see where it's even going to go. I mean, I think that one of the things we've seen evolve with the smartphone at the moment is that it's evolved beyond the phone. The phone aspect of it is something that is no longer relevant. We're just stuck with this legacy form factor. Right. And so much so that I think we're now starting to see kind of the phone used to be the ultimate convergence device. It replaced, for me, a camera, an in-car GPS, a Walkman type thing. But now we're starting to add secondary gadgets to it. And I think part of this secondary gadgets market is partly down to that this form factor doesn't work for everything, but it's also to increase that level of brand loyalty, especially where Apple is concerned. iMessage is definitely locked in. I don't see them ever putting iMessage on Windows or Android. And that for me, that would be the major factor for moving, would be no iMessage. I would honestly say that I've backed myself into a corner right there with that one, that I'm kind of stuck spending money on Apple stuff for that. Once your health data's in there, can you move it around? How easily can you move it around? I mean, if I'm thinking, can I gamble with my messaging service? I'm definitely not going to be able to gamble with my health data service. That's an entirely different matter. But I've got to say, I agree with Jason. It's mostly, we're going to be mostly moving into the cloud. We're going to be mostly kind of saying, it's down to the apps.
And I actually think the application programming standards, I believe, are going to shift in such a way that there really will be only one or two application development methods for mobile. You're really looking at persistent web apps that we're using web standards rather than platform-specific standards. So right now, I mean, actually, I think the company that's best equipped to write a most abstractive programming for both Android and Apple is honestly Microsoft.
Yeah.
Microsoft has .NET. They've got the Xamarin Form stuff. You can write if you start your project in Visual Studio, whether it's a game or major enterprise vertical application, whatever it is, and you code base in there on Windows, or really you could really use any platform you want. You could code it on Linux. You can code it on Apple. It really doesn't make a difference as long as you're using Visual Studio, because it's a web-based app development system, right? And you can then output that code to whatever platform you want that uses those native APIs in the back end. But on the front end for the developer, it's all the same code base. So they can simultaneously release on any platform they want, Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android, or anything else that pops up. And then, of course, you've got Google, which is working on what is this Flutter thing. Plus, they're adding support for the Swift language, which of course is another persistent web app language, right? That for rapid development that Apple created. So we're really moving away from these sort of like highly proprietary development systems. That if you're a game company, you got to have your iOS developers doing this thing, and you got your Android developers doing this thing, and your Windows developers doing this thing, and they kind of they do these crazy ways of swapping code. That's ending. There's only going to be one code base, and they're going to output simultaneously. So really, the apps should all eventually. There should not be any app gaps in the future, right? You're not going to say, oh well, this platform has Instagram, this one doesn't. It's going to have an equivalent functionality when I got to find that does something similar. No, it's literally going to be the same app's going to be across all platforms because it's written in the same language and it gets released the same day.
It would be really. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Unless we end up in a situation like with games consoles where we have this artificial kind of app gap,
right,
where and again, I wouldn't put it past it that that's where we're going to end up. That this artificial app gap is going to exist.
You mean you're talking about licensing deals and things like that?
Yeah. Just as we see with games consoles, you see one game released on one console, another one on another one, and you're just artificially creating that kind of app gap. And I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to start seeing more and more of that.
That's certainly possible.
Yeah, and so then what happens is you've got the sort of situation that we started with the iPhone when development was only supposed to be done using Xcode. It would be really ironic if Microsoft, who lost the smartphone war because of a lack of apps on Windows phones, started to win both the back end with Azure and the front end with the development environment across these platforms. But then if you're looking at the cloud and you're looking at the necessity for all of these companies to essentially be cloud-first companies, not even mobile first, but cloud first, then they're not going to want to cede their cloud audience to Azure or Microsoft. They're going to need to fight for that as a primary thing, right?
Well, I think it depends, though, right? Because I think a company like Microsoft really I see them wanting. It's very clear they're no longer the Windows company anymore. Like Windows is just one of their products. You really think about what their main product is. It's their public cloud capabilities, their back-end services for creating applications that other developers can leverage to make their own services in the cloud, right? So if you think about what they're doing, they are really big on partners. They just want to sell their compute capacity. They want to sell compute, memory storage, all those things at networking, and they want to invite all developers come in and make their own fiefdoms in little territories, right? And essentially, they don't want developers to have to worry about hosting infrastructure and any of that. They just want them to write applications, right, that they can sell. And I think that is really the future, right? Because at the end of the day, who can build data centers and back-end support services better than Microsoft or Amazon or Google Cloud Platform? These are the only companies that can build extremely resilient multi-geo data center infrastructures, right? A private hoster cannot do this, right? And so if you really want to think about how enterprises are trying to concentrate on running their businesses and their applications by using the cloud, that's exactly what these app developers for these mobile platforms are going to do also. They don't want to have to worry about standing up infrastructure and data centers now. They have finished services and compute and stuff that they can buy, and they can predict their consumption in a reasonable way and then scale it out very fast as soon as they need additional capacity. So that's that is the future, right? So Microsoft becoming a tools vendor and an infrastructure vendor more than it is an operating system. I mean, yeah, their apps are important too, but I see their apps as sort of a technology demonstration platform. If you look and see what the top applications are for iOS and Android, they're all Microsoft apps, Office 365, and they use, and Microsoft, is first to say, yes, we use our cross development platform tools to spit all these out. That's why Outlook for iOS and Outlook for Android are at parity, because we use these tools, right? So I think the power of what Microsoft can do, right, is going to be very apparent to developers, and it allows small developers to get in the game and write these very exploitive applications without making huge investments, right, in technology, in the startup of backends and things like that. So yeah, I think that the cloud is going to be great for all devices, not just smartphones, IoT especially, right? But we're going to have to start thinking about who are the best partners to go in. When you develop an IoT system, or if you develop an app for mobile, who is really your best technology supplier? Is it an AWS? Is it a Google platform? Is it a Microsoft? And why do you pick those platforms?
Well,
right?
that opens the door to security and privacy. Adrian, do you think
Yeah.
consumers prioritize either security and privacy over shiny objects?
I think they do when they're told they should. I think the rest of the time, I don't think people care. I think the whole Facebook thing you see is a prime example of it. People want to use Facebook. They're not comfortable with it, but still they want to use Facebook. It's the same. They pile data into their phones. Nobody cares. I think Apple is trying to raise that bar of kind of security, and maybe raise that specter of kind of that Google is selling your data and all this stuff, which, but again, at the end of the day, I don't think people care.
Does your average end user even understand what Cambridge Analytica actually did? I don't think so. No, I think that just like I think enterprises are reactive cultures when it comes to things like backups and understanding resiliency. They don't actually do anything until something actually really bad happens, right? Because this is just status quo. It's the same thing with Facebook and other these social networks. Whenever you have a data leak, it's like, oh my God, my password ended up at this cloud service, this app that I'm using. It got broken into, and now 50 million accounts are out in the wild, whatever it is. People don't react unless something personally bad happens to them. Otherwise, it's just sort of I'm on Facebook and I'm posting all my photos of my dogs and my children, and until people realize, oh wow, this stuff ended up in the wild, they don't tend to think about the implications of what they're putting up there.
So this week, ZDNet covered, news that doesn't come as a surprise, that many of the off vendors haven't been posting security updates to their users. Is this bad? Do we care? Will users care? Are we at a point where we're eventually going to doom our users and ourselves?
I think in essence they could be doomed already for all they know. I mean, but again, it's down to kind of what do people care about. If there's certain information I think people would really care about, and I think this is where health platforms become quite important. I think people's health data would be something that they're quite intimately kind of protective of. But I think the rest of it is reactionary. I think they look at Facebook and say, well, I'm posting on Facebook anyway. I think if their arch enemy kind of got hold of their Facebook messages, maybe they'd feel different, or somebody kind of found out what somebody was saying about somebody else, whatever else happens on social media. I think people would care. But on the whole, I think people don't care about their data until it's either missing or until they have a hefty financial loss as a result of it.
Right.
So we've talked a lot about whether people care or don't care. So let's look at this and say, going into the future, why would people buy new smartphones? I mean, obviously, one is they run out of battery power, or they break, or they piss them off. But what would make people care to actually spend that $1,000 every 2 years or 3 years?
I don't think people are going to be spending $1,000 every 2 or 3 years. I think people are going to be spending $200 every 1 or 2 years, and that's why the toxic health stew sort of does not matter in the long run. I mean, it matters from a stability standpoint, right? No one likes it when their smartphone crashes or freezes, right? But it's less of an aggravating thing when you're spending $200 every year versus $1,000 every year or so. And you're definitely not worried about patches and updates if you're only spending $200 on a device, right? Versus $1,000 on a device. So I tend to think that these devices are going to be very disposable. And if you want the next version of Android, you're going to need to buy a new phone, right? I think Apple will always be a premium device, right? I think that but I think that market will begin to erode, right? When people really see that a $200 device does 80% or 90% of what a $1,000 device does, right? I just don't see people having that long-term brand loyalty. They do when these products cost very similar to each other, but when there's a huge gap, I don't think so. I mean, yeah.
I think the other problem is as soon as you kind of release $1,000 smartphone, people are always going to be interested in it because it's a big price point. They're thinking they're getting something special out of it. But are they going to spend that in a year or 2 years again? I think there's always this idea that people, they're happy to spend the money initially, but they want something cheaper the next time. They're not going to expect to spend $1,000 in 2 years, I think. And I think that's always going to be the problem with Apple. That Apple wants to push that ceiling up, but I think users at the end of the day look at it, well, I got a $1,000 smartphone. Okay, I'm going to spend another $1,000 on it in 2 years or 3. And that's the scary thing about these ones is, do you even get 3 years out of them?
Well, I got 3 years out of these. I mean, I've got 2 of these. They're both iPhone 6s Pluses. I dare you to tell me what color they are because I don't care.
You don't care.
But the question is, on one side, some of these things will become fashion accessories, at which point people go insane. That's why there's lots of people who've bought different watch bands for their watches, and I don't even want to touch on that because I don't understand that part of the market. We just assume.
You got to remember the three of us are kind of in like a weird bubble because we evaluate these technologies. And for example, I get a new iPhone and a new iPad every year, and because my iPhone X, I even went to their upgrade plan, which is essentially leasing the thing. So I don't actually keep any of my device. And before I was selling them back to Amazon for like half the price, just to recoup some of the investment and roll it into the next one. But I don't think your average person does that. My mother and father still have the same iPhone 6 Plus. They've had for whatever 3 years now, and they have no intent, and they just had the battery placed on it, and they now act just as good as new.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think as long as your average person doesn't drop the damn thing and smash it, right? My parents both have auto boxes, and they're probably are essentially still brand new on the inside that case.
Yeah, we actually bought the upgrade plan for these things, and we didn't upgrade because this.
But does Facebook actually run different on an iPhone 6s versus an X, or does Instagram run? I mean, the cameras maybe is sure a little bit better, but again, if you look at the quality of the photo that Instagram saves to its cloud, it's not high definition. It's been scaled down. So and the same thing with Facebook is not full definition pictures and things like that. Neither does Twitter. None of those services do.
Yeah, and I maintain that the reason.
So why do I have a 40 megapixel camera on this Huawei P20 that just got sent to me? I can't upload it in native resolution to any of those services.
No, but you could do what you did in one picture where you zoomed in real close and grabbed a small chunk of megapixels from that image and made it look amazing.
Yeah, but even still. Like I said, a 3-year-old phone versus a new one. I'm not seeing the innovation in the actual applications themselves to differentiate between. Actually, there's one game that I play on iPad that I know exploits the iPad's iPad Pro super resolute. It's like Real Racing 3 or something, right? And that uses every single clock cycle, every single graphics capability that device has. But most of the games I play on my iPad. Like I got one which is that I love. I don't know why the hell I still play it, but it's called Fallout Shelter, right? You're playing with you're dragging little people around inside the rooms and stuff. I mean, a 3-year-old iPad plays it just as well as a brand new one, right? So I don't see the exploitation in the apps justifying the price of these devices.
So okay, let's take this. This is 2018. Let's go to 2028. All right. And what is the state of mobile computing, desktop computing, but more specifically, what are we walking around with and connecting with? Because today, if you look at 2018 versus, let's say, 1998, we are far more mobile and connected wherever we are than we ever were back, in 1998. And we were mostly tied to our desks with with some chunky laptops. Let's move forward to 2028. What is the daily life computer phone? What does the smartphone look like? Who are the vendors?
I
Take us
think
into the
we can
future.
make rough technology predictions about processing capability and things like that, but I actually believe what we're actually starting to see is a rejection of social media services and constant connectivity because it's making everybody anxious. So while I do see advancements in the core technologies, like I do see, yeah, we're going to more cores, we're going to go faster chips, or all these things, right? And more miniaturization, right? Okay, maybe we'll be working around with watches as the primary processor core for whatever goggles or glasses or anything that we have, or and those things. But I do think that in 10 years we'll have a much better sense of how our lives have turned out by being constantly updated and connected, right? And I consider myself a very strong technology person, right? I got IoT devices all over my house. I got all these smartphones. I got tablets. I got laptops. I got desktop computers, screens all over the place. And I I I find tremendous value at age 48. Okay, because I'm not part of the millennial or Gen Y generation, which basically got born with these things attached to them, right? But we got to witness the evolution of this technology, and we're strong users of this technology. I want to detach from it at the end of the day. I don't want people to be able to reach me or ping me after 5 p.m. necessarily, or 11 o'clock at night. So I think what we're going to see from the millennial and Gen Y generations are very much the same things. They're going to want to, they will, I think, reject this technology use 24/7. They're going to value their interpersonal time. So I think that we're going to have technologies where we can set controls on on how these things can constantly agitate us. Um, you know, will we have AR technologies? Will we have smart homes, devices that'll follow us everywhere? Better Alexas. Instead of having an Alexa that where I yell at it and I it'll have context of what room I'm in versus like have there being this single Alexa that sort of responds to everything, right? Yeah, you'll have perhaps home robots, right? That and I see as we have an aging population, there'll be people perhaps that don't have children or what have you. They'll need caretakers, right? I think that you'll see it with wealthy people first, right? They'll have robots that'll help them do certain things. I think that just like we have, the smartphones and PCs were once something that the upper middle class can only afford, right? Or wealthy people can only afford. You'll start to see that happening with robots, right? You'll have, I mean, because if you look at things like, what's that company that I think Google invested into, those Cambridge guys, different Cambridge guys, but you always see that robot dog video, that looks like
Yeah.
something out of the Terminator. Um, Look at where that's going to be in 10 years.
Yeah.
We'll be able to walk into Walmart or Costco and buy a robot for $1,000, or $2,000. That will, it'll serve you food. It'll perhaps fold your laundry. It'll do all those things, right? So that you can take back more of your personal life. And I see technology as enabling us to take back more of our lives than us sort of working for the technology, which is kind of like what we're doing now.
Yeah.
Adrian?
Yeah. I think one thing we're going to see is just more streamlining of it. I think we're in a kind of an odd position now where we're kind of, as Jason just said, we're working for the technology. It's really not there in terms of, I think of all the devices I've got and how I interact with them, and the awkwardness of interacting, especially voice at the moment is really can be really awkward. I've got the Alexa just over there, and it's, you have to speak to it in a certain way. I think these are going to change. I think it's going to get more streamlined. It's going to get easier, but I think technology is going to fall more into the background as it becomes quicker to do things. As it becomes
when technology is at its best, it's invisible.
Absolutely, and I think that's where I think over 10 years we're going to start to see that kind of streamlining. I mean, how much more have we got to say? You only need one social media. You need one. You don't need multiple methods of talking to the same person on the same device. You don't need Facebook Messenger and iMessage and email and whatever else, Skype. You've only got certain amounts of stuff to say. And I think people are going to realize that more isn't better. That at the end of the day, technology has to work for them. And I've been spending especially the last year, looking at how technology works for me rather than how I'm just becoming its slave, just for the hell of using it. And I've used it to get fitter. I've used it to streamline my work. I've used it to kind of try and streamline stuff I do at home. There's a lot of speed bumps in the way of that. I think faster processing and I think cloud will be where that mostly lies. I don't think devices need to get that much faster. I'd love to see better innovations in battery technology. I think that's one thing that definitely we're seeing stuff being held back in, especially if we're going to move on to more miniaturized devices. I mean, this thing is
battery and more sort of ubiquitous wireless charging, right? I mean, I should be able to put my phone on my desk, and there should be an emitter or something that charges all my devices on my desk, and they should all be able to draw power, as best as they possibly can, right? I mean, look, we even have multiple freaking USB high-speed charging standards. That doesn't make any sense, right?
No.
There should just be one USB PD standard that charges everything that we have. Or there should be one wireless charge. Apple should not have a separate 7.5 watt standard, and Samsung has 15 and someone else has 10, right? And I shouldn't have to buy 3 different types of pads for each of those ecosystems. That makes no sense at all. Right.
It only makes sense in terms of creating market confusion, so that people stick with what they've got. That's why it's there. It's there to create market confusion, so that people don't know what works for them, so they stick with what they know because they don't want to make mistakes, especially costly mistakes, where they end up having to buy more stuff. And I think Apple is again spearheading this kind of idea of kind of, if you move away from it, you're going to be spending a lot of money once you start moving away from it.
And Apple, people feel safe because Apple's a known quantity, right? So that's very important, So
yeah, and I think I was going to say.
But then it is
go ahead.
though. When you look at, I haven't bought the new MacBook Pro because I don't want to move on to USB-C. And right there is the kind of I like my old MacBook, but the new ones, I don't know.
Yeah, we're doing this thing on a 2013 iMac, and I've been looking at. I just did a piece on what I want in a Mac Mini Pro, but I've looked at the new iMacs, and I definitely need more performance, but I don't want that screen. I want a different form factor screen. I want a big wide screen. I want something really wide, and so I don't want to be saddled with this big heavy thing, and I also don't want to necessarily spend $17,000 or $13,000 to get the computer I want. But I use Final Cut, and I use Final Cut not because I like it better, but because it works better. Premiere has crashed so many times that I moved to Final Cut and optimized on the Mac. So I do want some of these solutions, but I'm willing to stick with the older technology. Now, looking forward,
you're an edge case though, because you have very specific vertical market.
Very specific,
applications.
Yeah, absolutely. And in my case, I'm very edge case. I mean, right now I'm using 4 or 5 Apple devices to produce this thing, and I'm not doing it by choice with the Apple devices. It's just that the different pieces of software happen to work relatively well in this environment. But looking forward 10 years, I think we're on a cusp, and what I mean by that is, we could make this somewhat better, or it could get a lot worse. If we see, an ongoing flood of security breaches and companies unwilling to fix it, all of a sudden consumers have no way to protect themselves. If we look at too much lock-in, if we look at the major players fighting to keep their markets without having any kind of crossover between them, we could see a lot of fragmentation, and we could see things where interop doesn't work, and we could see things getting substantially worse. Now, on the other hand, if you look at things like autonomous vehicles, for me right now, I love driving my muscle car. But, at some point, we're all going to be older, and there are older people now, and being mobile. I mean, my parents in their last couple of years of their lives, before they got really sick, their problem was they couldn't drive. And if they could have driven, they would have felt so much more free. Autonomous vehicles may help older people do that. So on one hand, we have the benefit of some of these technologies, health management technologies, even the thermostat that I can now turn up or down from in bed without
Yeah.
waking up to get out of bed. But we also have the potential of all of this risk. And I think the next 10 years are where we're at the cusp of that transition. Is this going to be good technology, or is it going to get real bad? And I think that's up to us as technology writers, and up to the big firms
Yeah.
and governments to move us in a direction that's not counterproductive or frankly deeply destructive.
Yeah.
I think we're safer if we move away from little firms to bigger firms. I think Amazon buying Ring is a good
Yeah.
thing. I think ultimately, it makes me better to standardize on something. I think I think there's going to be a lot of gambles, and I think there's going to be a lot of things that die on the wayside, and that's always been the case with technology.
Yeah, well, because we're early adopters, right? I mean, I have a lot of IoT stuff in my house. I got the Linksys, the Belkin, switches here. I got Philips here. I got these other things here because I was testing all those things. And realistically, I expect half that stuff to die and have to replace it within a few years, and it's going to suck. But
Yep.
what I'm hoping is that the standardization efforts will improve to such that if you buy an IoT device from wherever it is, that they will have hooks into all the different automation ecosystems, right? That you won't have to worry, oh, will this camera work with this thermostat, or will this
Yeah.
And I mean, I have a garage door opener that's connected to Alexa and all this other stuff, right? Do I have to worry about it working with whatever smartphone I have? Right? You shouldn't have to worry about that stuff in a couple of years. The stuff should just work, right? But now that is clearly not the case, right? Because companies fall, they go out of business and nobody buys them or doesn't inherit their intellectual property, and then stuff just stops working.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've had a doorbell that just corroded, whereas it replaced a doorbell switch that had been there for 10 years and it was fine. I've got 3 Nest smoke alarms that have died within 6 months of one another, and whereas the old ones they replaced probably did 10 years of service without any problems, and so there's a lot of teething troubles with this stuff, and I think you start to look at the price of it and how long it lasts, and it's like, but we're the early adopters. We're the ones that kind of get the arrows.
But
Yeah.
even if it was dirt cheap, and these devices, like a smart switch costed the same as a regular switch, or there's maybe a 10 or 15% price differential, if they die, that's still annoying because that's taking my labor time, right? I have to go out and I got to get the screwdriver, I got to turn up the electricity and replace the damn thing. So I've just spent 20, 30 minutes out of my time.
Even if they replaced it for free, which I must admit, kind of the doorbell got replaced for free. My Nest smoke alarms, they'll replace them for free, but it's still the time, and it's also getting woken up at 3:30 in the morning, thinking your house is on fire.
Yeah, that doesn't go over real well. So on that note, let's wrap this up with answering. I think we've sort of answered the question, but let's go to each of you and final thoughts, where to find you online, and answering the question, smartphones, is there any innovation left in this market? Adrian, you want to take that first?
I think there definitely is innovation. I think the problem is going to be selling it to people, and also, is it what people want? I mean, I'm seeing AR at the moment as being kind of, Apple seems to be banking on that. Do people want it? Don't know. It still remains to be seen. So there's definitely innovation there. Whether it actually exists within the smartphone or not is another question.
And where can folks find you online?
Best place to find me is over Hardware 2.0 on ZDNet, or I'm the PC Doc on Twitter, where if anybody wants to kind of send their love or hate, I'll gladly respond to it.
Let's go with love, everybody. This is all about love. And
All
speaking of love, that brings me to Jason. Jason, where can people find you online? Is there still innovation left? And your final thoughts.
So I agree with Adrian. I think there's still plenty of innovation left in the consumer technology industry. I just think, smartphones and tablets, they just happen to be the default mass market, compute endpoint, for your average consumer user, right? At the moment, right? This is not to say that something else might not replace it in the future, right? It's whatever it's whatever the technologies and people adapt to based on the services and applications and things that they want to use, right? And I think that again, as the technology becomes more transparent, as the stuff becomes be built into our homes and our cars and our workplaces, you know, uh, the best technology should be indistinguishable from magic, right? As what Arthur C. Clarke said. So, yeah, there's plenty of innovation to be left. Is it in smartphones? I don't know. I think that what we're going to see is very clear commoditization of the space, where this stuff becomes so ridiculously cheap that the idea of arguing about smartphone vendors and versions of OSs and things like that is going to sound ridiculous in 3 to 5 years' time, right? Um, again, I believe everything is going to come down to the cloud, right? I think that's the convergence point for all these device things. It's going to be the cloud and applications running on the cloud. Where can you find me? On ZDNet's Tech Broiler blog, and also at jperlow on Twitter.
And with that, I want to thank my guests, Adrian Kingsley-Hughes and Jason Perlow. For ZDNet, this is David Gewirtz, and thank you for tuning in. This was a lot of fun, and hopefully we'll be doing more of these. So come on back, post your comments and questions below. We'll do our best to answer them. And what do you think? Where do you think innovation in the smartphone is going to be? Let us know below. Once again, my name is David Gewirtz, and for ZDNet, thank you very much, and have yourself a great day and a great week. Bye-bye.